I often tell people that I used to love living in Chiang Mai. I moved there in 2002 and spent a long time, probably 15, 16 years living in Chiang Mai, in and around the city, and I really did enjoy it. It's a pretty cool place to be. It's a city that's big, but it's not too big. I think the current population's around 1.2 million, and it is vibrant. It's full of life. It's full of interesting culture and all, the ancient side of the city, but also the modern side of the city. It's pretty easy to get around. There's fairly good public transport. It's a little bit sort of haphazard, but now with ride sharing, it's become easier. But then you've also got the more traditional types of transport, like your songtaos, the red trucks, and then the different coloured trucks that are like minibuses that take you to and from the centre of the city. And there's also your tuk-tuks that are mainly used by tourists. But now ride sharing has made it so much easier and so much more convenient and quite a bit cheaper than some of the more traditional forms of transport if you're a foreigner. But as a city, there's so much there. There's so much of interest. And if you're just wanting to relax and chill out, so coming to retire, Chiang Mai is a fabulous place. It would be a great place to retire because everything's there. You've got all your shopping, you've got all your conveniences. The internet's really good, mostly, and so is power and water, everything like that. All your utilities are good. So your options for shopping are as good as anywhere, or sometimes even better. If you're a lover of shopping malls, you can walk into any of the big malls. I think there's 3 of them that are still open. There's a couple have closed recently. One of the oldest ones and one of the newest ones closed, so there was a bit of a glut, but there's still 3 big malls. 2 of them are huge, and you can walk in there and feel like you're pretty much anywhere in the world. I'm not a fan of shopping malls, but sometimes they're convenient. Even if you just need to get out of the heat for a while during the hot season, the shopping mall's not a bad place to be. So you can do that, or you can shop in the smaller areas and the local areas out in the suburban places. There's smaller shopping areas that are kind of strip mall type things that are convenient. And then one of the places that I usually shop the most is in local markets, because this is where we tend to buy our fresh food and all the convenience that we have there. And I just like the atmosphere more. It's more friendly, it's more relational, which is very much the way the Thai people do things, is to do it relationally. And that's nice, and it makes a bit of a difference to just being in a busy mall with a lot of noise and busyness, and having to park in a multi-level car park building and stuff like that. Usually at the market you can just sort of pull up and park and be in the market within a minute, but at the shopping malls everything's a bit bigger and a bit more spread out, so I tend to prefer shopping more locally. But like I said, if the malls are your thing, there's plenty of those in Chiang Mai. And in the malls you've also got your cinemas and restaurants and stuff like that. It's all fairly generic. They usually franchise operations, so you know what you're going to get. And then if you prefer to eat outside, if you prefer to eat more authentic, you can really do that. There's so many options for great restaurants. Thais tend to eat out quite a lot, and you get your full range. So there's a whole range from your very, very cheap street food meals to very, very high-class restaurants that can serve you cuisine from all over the world now. So if you want to try something other than Thai food, there's plenty of options for that as well, which is great. And there are plenty of options for places to live. You can stay in the centre of town in a small loft apartment, or you can rent a place in a condo in a big condominium building, or you can go a little bit further out of town and be in a gated community in a standalone house and have a bit more convenience like that. Or you can go a little bit further out even again and get some land and still be relatively close to the city. And it's pretty safe to get around too. It's pretty safe, I guess, unless you're in town in the middle of the night in some of the dodgy areas, but there's not even many of those because it's not really a big city and it doesn't really have a big city vibe. So it's generally, by and large, it's a pretty safe place to be, really. And if you're renting, there's lots of options that you can rent very, very cheap, from maybe 3,000 or 4,000 baht a month to way, way higher than that. You can there's some really, it depends on size, depends on location, and also the quality of the type of accommodation that you want. A few years ago I was in New Zealand. I'd made a trip down to New Zealand and I'd come back again, and my wife said to me, hey, I think we should look at buying some land and building a house. And it was like, I sort of thought, wow, that's an interesting option. How on earth are we going to manage to do that? But that's how it started. We just got into this conversation and started dreaming and started having this idea of moving outside of Chiang Mai a little bit, buying a little bit big piece of land and building a home. And that's what we ended up doing. It was the beginning of a dream that just started from a single conversation. And yeah, now we've moved out here. Now we've got a home that's hidden behind the trees because we've got so much that we've planted. And then, yeah, we're living rurally. So this is our view. This is what we look at from our home. And it is quite something. So this is why I used to love living in Chiang Mai, because now we've got a place of our own, a place that we've designed and built ourselves, and we're quite comfortable living here in the middle of the rice fields and the orchards, and it's a great place to be. It's really peaceful, it's a really friendly place to be, and quite frankly I'll be quite happy if I don't have to move anywhere else ever again in my life. So we've gotten away from the things that we didn't like about Chiang Mai. It was always pretty noisy, especially the last place that I was living. It wasn't particularly loud, but there was always just the hum of traffic and construction and people around. And then also the traffic, which has gotten progressively worse since the first time that I came here 21 years ago. It just doesn't improve. They've put a lot of infrastructure in Chiang Mai and improved the roading a lot, but the traffic is overtaking it. The traffic build-up has been quicker than the infrastructure build-up, and so it still gets really, really congested, especially around the rush hour times in the morning and in the evenings. Ever since I was young and I first travelled, I've wanted to have a home with a mountain view, and this is a fulfilment of that part of the dream. I had left New Zealand when I was 21, 22 years old and hitchhiked across Canada. I'd lived in Europe for a while and then returned to New Zealand a little bit sooner than I anticipated, and I kind of had itchy feet, so I continued to hitchhike. I went down to the South Island of New Zealand to visit a friend of mine, and we rented a big farmhouse in the middle of a big field for, I think it was like $25 a week. And we had this fabulous view of the Southern Alps, and ever since living there and just experiencing that view and living in a peaceful environment, I've wanted to have a mountain view, and now I've got one. So that was a big part of the initial attraction to buying this property, but that's a whole other story for another video or two. The experience now of living rurally with my mountain view is actually better than I could have ever imagined. And we're really not that far away from anything. I mean, looking here, there's not a lot of other man-made structures that we can see. We've got the jetty out there, there's a few other houses and things like that, but we're really in the middle of nowhere. But we're still about just 1 hour's easy drive from Chiang Mai. The roads are all good. We don't even have to traverse any mountain roads. There's no real narrow winding roads to get here. And so when we do need to go back to Chiang Mai for anything, it's pretty straightforward, it's pretty easy. And I know people that live in Bangkok that have got a 2-hour commute to work and back each day, and they don't even leave the city. Here we're an hour from Chiang Mai and we are well out into the fields, and it is very quiet, it's very peaceful, and it's very relaxing, yet convenient enough when we do need to go into the city. But most of the time we can get everything we need down in Tom Dong, which is the town closest to us. It's 10 or 12 kilometres away, and it's got everything. It's got the supermarkets, gas stations, it's got a bunch of good restaurants, it's got the biggest main store that I think I've ever been in, which is all the hardware, all the farming supplies, all your building supplies, stuff like that. The staff ride bicycles around the shop because it's just so big, and so this is also very convenient. We're often down there buying bits and pieces that we need for the house, or a lot of the construction materials that we used when the house was built came from that source as well. And so most of what we need we can get locally, or if not, it's just a matter of getting online and ordering it. All the delivery drivers locally know where we live, and it's just super convenient that we can buy anything online that we can't get locally. And our internet connection, our electricity, our water supply, all those things are really good. I've actually got the fastest internet connection here that I've ever had anywhere. In Thailand, generally, internet connections are shared, and so if you're working online and in the evening when everybody's at home locally, the speed slows down. But when you don't have any neighbours close by, it doesn't seem to affect us at all. And I do really enjoy the peacefulness out here, the lack of traffic. There's a small road that runs along here at the top of the section. It might get 10 or 15 vehicles passing in a day, so it's not exactly busy. And the other thing I like about the lack of traffic is that when I go out for a bike ride in the morning, and I do that most mornings, just for 20 or 30 minutes to wake me up and to get me started for the day, there's virtually no traffic. It's really peaceful, it's really quiet, and it's very, very safe. So that's a big plus for me, to be able to really enjoy riding my bicycle without any traffic or without any busyness around. It really allows me to just wake up well at the beginning of each day. One thing that we had not anticipated when we moved here from Chiang Mai is the strength of the wind. We get some really, really good storms here. Most of the time, like it is now, it's nice and peaceful, it's quiet, it's not stormy at all. Today, the last few days, been really overcast. We have a lot of rain, but that's not uncommon anywhere in the north and in the rainy season. But what is unusual from someone who's lived in Chiang Mai for so long to come, we're living at the base of the mountain, and I think that just the air pressure changes, the wind just tends to funnel down the valleys from the mountain, and it is just incredibly strong sometimes. When we first moved in here and the first time we had a storm, it was just unbelievable. We were really worried that we might lose our roof. A couple of the trees in the orchard next door, big lamyai trees with big fat trunks on them, they just ended up crashing to the ground and just completely just wrecked by the wind. And this is, it's not a problem. The roof stayed on, but it is an issue when you've got a Thai kitchen. Quite often most of the houses that I lived in Chiang Mai certainly had an outdoor kitchen or a semi-outdoor kitchen that is not fully enclosed. And when there's no strong wind and no driving rain, that's not a problem. But down here for the first couple of years, it was a bit of an issue because every now and again we'd get this rain blowing sideways through our outside kitchen. So we'd sort of scramble to cover things up the first time and then, just organise things so that it wasn't an issue. I put some screens up during the first few rainy seasons to stop the rain coming through into the kitchen, and now the trees have grown. We've planted a lot of trees everywhere in the section, but around the kitchen in particular, it helps just to stop that rain coming. And this was just, it was a weird thing that I hadn't anticipated, but it's a strange thing in Chiang Mai. It's surrounded by mountains, but it's in a valley, and it never really gets any strong wind. So we've just had to learn to adapt to that, and as I said, now the trees are growing, it's not really a problem. One thing that I was a little concerned about when we moved down here as a foreigner is how would I integrate, how would I be accepted by the local people. I speak some Thai, but it's not really great. I'm not fluent by any means, and there aren't a lot of foreigners around here, and my wife isn't from this area, and so these were just little questions of things that were in the back of our mind as to how things would go, but we discovered very early on just how friendly the local people here are. My wife had to go up into the village to meet the village headman, the Puye Ban, as we were still building the house, and the first time they met, the headman said to my wife, he said, when you're here, if you're out working in your garden near the road and somebody stops their motorcycle on the way and wants to have a conversation, you stop and talk to them. And when there's something happening in the village, you come and join in. If we've got something celebrating at the temple, you come and be part of this community. When somebody dies, you come to the funeral. You're part of the community, so we want you to be involved. And that was like, wow, that's fantastic. That's so friendly. And this was just the beginning of my realisation, or our realisation, of how friendly the locals are. We get on really well here. It's a lovely community. The people are so friendly, and they are extremely patient with my lack of Thai language. Some of them more than others, which is generally the case anyway, anywhere, but I've found that the local people are just willing to take time to understand and have me understand them, and it's really nice. We've got a Thai friend that came and stayed with us when we moved down here for a while, and she commented one day after talking with some of the locals that they sound like me when I'm speaking Thai. And I sort of said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, it sounds like your accent, which I sort of found quite bizarre. I said, so you're telling me that these people here sound like they speak Thai with a New Zealand accent? And I thought she was just having me on, but some months later she was back here with a young niece, and one of our neighbours came to visit, had a conversation, and after they left, this young lady was the young niece was mimicking the way the person was speaking, not in a rude way, but just that she was curious. And as I listened to her speaking the way this person had been speaking, I thought, it does sound very much like a New Zealand accent when they're speaking Thai. So I just kind of figured that I'm in the right place. And as I said, I love being here. I used to love living in Chiang Mai, and if this is the last place that I ever live in my life, I'm a happy man.